Hello and welcome to the Backlog Odyssey. I'm Patrick, and this time around on Game Bites, we'll be taking a look at God of War for the PlayStation 4. God of War is a series that's been around for a long time, well, at least since the PS2 days, and it has always been about action, head-ripping, gratuitous QTE sequences, and uncontrollable rage. Well, this 2018 reboot of sorts, developed by the longtime God of War proprietors Santa Monica Studios, has all of that and more. Well, minus the whole QTE fiasco, an overabundance of glorious beards, and an unhealthy obsession with the word boy. I honestly think that word has now lost its meaning to me. God of War, like the previous games, is a character action game, where it's all about combos, it's all about timing your attacks, learning enemy weaknesses and how to kill them more efficiently. But this time around, instead of being in Greece and facing up against the Greek gods like Zeus and Ares, we are now in Midgard facing up against the Norse gods, or the Aesir and the Vanir. One of the biggest changes you'll see in the game is actually the perspective, or the camera angle. Instead of being the typical third-person camera where it's kind of zoomed out and you can see 360 degrees around your character, this time they brought it right up behind Kratos' shoulder, similar to Resident Evil 4 or Gears of War. And the biggest thing about that camera angle change is how it affects combat. Instead of being able to say see around 360 degrees where you can see enemies coming in from every angle, now you can really only see the front 180 degrees or so in front of Kratos, which means the enemies behind you can still attack, but you can't see them coming. And the way that the developers helped with that is they added a little ring around Kratos. It will tell you when enemies are going to attack, from which angle, and what type of attack it's going to be. So a white arrow is where an enemy is. A red arrow is when an enemy is attacking you with a melee attack, and then a purplish arrow is when they're shooting some sort of projectile. And the best course of action at that time would be just to dodge, or dodge like crazy until you don't get hit. Another mechanic that the developers added was the parry mechanic. So when an enemy attacks, if you have the right timing with your block, you'll parry them, allowing you to counter, allowing you to increase the amount of stun damage that you do. So enemies, when you hit them, their stun gauges will go up, and once their gauge goes all the way up, they're now immobilized, allowing you free hits, some breathing room, so on and so forth. Your attacking and combos, very similar to the original trilogy, including Ascension, where, button combinations will do various combos. You'll get different moves as you level up through the game, allowing you to strategize in how you want to fight enemies. And one of the biggest mechanics that they added, at least action-wise, was the fact that no longer does Kratos have the chains of chaos with his whipping and such, but instead we have the Leviathan axe, which seems to be some sort of enchanted axe that Kratos can throw, and he can recall it like a boomerang, similar to Thor's Mjolnir or whatever it's called. In this God of War, there's a much more kind of somber atmosphere. It's definitely much more story focused, much more about Kratos as a character instead of about his rage and wanting to kill everything, though that is still kind of a theme. I mean, Kratos is pretty easy to pee off, if you know what I'm saying. You start off finding out that Kratos' wife has died, and now you and your son Atreus need to take her ashes to the summit of the highest mountain in all of Midgard. And along this journey, Kratos and Atreus run into, of course, the Midgard gods, with the first being Baldur. And I won't say too much about it because it's an intense fight and encounter with Kratos, but it's a good way really to get you addicted to this game. And of course, because of this encounter, Kratos gets all mad and decides to kill everything in his path. Another big change that the developers have made to this God of War compared to the previous ones is that instead of being a linear game, the game is now kind of has an open world feel. So that means they've added side quests, they've added item collecting, they've added different worlds for you to travel to within this kind of hub world of Midgard, and that will grant you access to different types of enemies, different types of items and scenery. It's very, very cool. And then because of all of these changes that the developers have made, I'm assuming they needed to try to find a way to make Kratos' progression, his kind of leveling, a little more open-ended as well. I know that in the original God of War games, you could level up Kratos in any way that you want it with those souls or whatever they were. And it's very similar this time around, but instead you have kind of a more wide range of abilities that you can level up. And you do that by the experience that you get from killing enemies and completing these side quests that you encounter, and from the hack silver, which is the currency of the game, which is primarily used for buying upgrades and items and equipment and so on. Another thing you'll notice is that Kratos has a power level, and this power level is kind of Kratos' overall experience level. It determines how powerful Kratos is and kind of the strength of enemies he can encounter, and that's a combination of all his weapons, his armor, and accessories. And then finally, Kratos' primary weapon, the Leviathan Axe. And this can be upgraded as well as his armor by visiting a blacksmith, or I guess multiple blacksmiths, and those would be Brock and Sindri. Kind of notorious Norse mythology blacksmiths that I think they crafted many of the magical weapons that the gods used in Norse mythology. And everything from the pommel of the axe, you can get enchantments, you can get things called heavy and light runic attacks. Those are runes that Kratos will affix to his axe that will allow him to do special abilities, which is very cool. They're kind of on a cooldown, similar to how abilities in, say, like Diablo work. And then Atreus, his little boy, is also useful in battle. He has his bow, which can get different types of arrows. He can get his own armor as well. And all of this is upgradable, so their abilities, your enchantments, your weapons, your armor, everything can be crafted based on the items that you find. They can be upgraded with those items as well, and can be purchased with your hack silver. Very cool, very different compared to the previous games. Another thing that Atreus has is similar to Kratos, is he has these summon runes that he can equip, and it's a little later in the game that you get them, but it's basically he can summon these kind of familiars that will help you in battle, for a short period of time. They're kind of like Kratos' runic attacks, where they're kind of these special abilities that are on cooldowns, but definitely good for crowd control. And as I mentioned, Atreus can also get various different types of arrows, and those things are generally used for, one, stunning enemies or doing specific types of status effects to enemies like electrocution and so on, and for solving the various puzzles that you'll find throughout the game, a la Metroid or Zelda. So you'll see an obstacle that you can't pass, you realize that you get this new ability that allows you to bypass that, and you can move on. It's definitely adds a lot of exploration, and I definitely appreciate that. And then finally, the boss fights. You gotta ask about the boss fights in a God of War, because those were one of the main draws of those games. And I will say that those boss fights definitely exist in this, and they're all just as exciting as they were in the previous ones. So, although Santa Monica has made so many different changes to God of War, everything from the graphics to the gameplay, just everything about the game itself is just this complete and wonderful package. I would recommend it to anybody, really. I'm super excited to play more, and be sure to check out my review when it's live on the Backlog Odyssey. The link will be in the description below. So tell me, what do you guys think of this game? Are you excited about where Santa Monica is taking God of War? Do you think it's the right direction? And what are your thoughts on the series as a whole? Let me know in the comments down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at Backlog Odyssey and on Instagram at The Backlog Odyssey to stay up to date with when we post new stuff and just random gaming shenanigans that I happen to post. Until next time, I'm Patrick. This is The Backlog Odyssey. Have a good one.
Leave my home.
You are going to have to kill me for that to happen.
I warned you.
Finally.